Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Some of you might remember that often quoted exchange from the 1992 classic A Few Good Men, where Tom Cruise playing Lieutenant Kaffee asks to be told the truth, and Jack Nicholson's Marine Colonel Jessup says, "You can't handle the truth." Now, that was about an inconvenient, ugly truth that he was trying to hide, and he was guilty. We are now reversing this equation. We are reversing this logic and asking, are we also in a state of mind now where we can't handle the truth when it isn't as bad as we expected it to be, or as popular wisdom might have wanted it to be, or might have expected it to be? And this is to do with India's corona figures right now. I am not wagering anything on what might happen in future, particularly once the lockdown is lifted. But the fact is that our numbers right now, until now, are quite conservative, touch wood, fingers crossed, in control, fortunately for India, and unfortunately for those who might have expected a much bigger story, because it has disappointed a lot of the commentariat, not just around the world, but in India as well, because somehow this looks too good to be true. So the question then is, maybe it is too good to be true because it is not true, because the government is lying. Every day the government holds a briefing. They give out a set of data. These briefings, you remember Vietnam War briefings, those used to take place at 5 o'clock, so they were called 5 o'clock follies. So maybe these are 4 o'clock follies. And you see quite a bit of bureaucratic ducking and weaving and evasion there, but you get a set of data at the end of the day. Once you have the data, you should see it with a high degree of suspicion, as we also do and our reporters do. And then we look for evidence elsewhere to see whether it's right or not. Because when the government gives you data or any figures, you start with the presumption that the government must be lying. But once you start with that presumption, unless you can find another set of facts to counter what's been claimed, you cannot say that this has to be wrong just because it's my gut feeling. And that's where we invoke N.R. Narayan Murthy, one of the founders of Infosys, who always says, in God we trust, the rest of you bring data. Now, where do you get this data from? In India, health is a state subject. So you can't even say that Narendra Modi and his government are controlling all data all over India, because there are states across the country which are not only not run by the BJP, but also run by parties openly and clearly hostile to the BJP. So they don't share the same vested interest. Also, there is a lot of data available from hospitals, from surveillance by public health authorities and elsewhere. And also, this country is now far too open, has too much media, too many activists, too much civil society, and too many citizens have mobile phones and access to a social media handle, and the sense that if an injustice is being done, they reach out to somebody somewhere. There is enough of that available now, so you can say that it's not as if tens of thousands or even thousands of bodies can be hidden. This is not like Wuhan. This is not like China, where they've just come up to say, oh, we got our count of the dead wrong in Wuhan by just about 50% overnight. And this is just the beginning. We don't know where it will end up. In India, you cannot do those things. Now, you can search for data. So data we quote here is a set of charts that Shamika Ravi at Brookings Institute shares on her Twitter handle every day. And we give you a link with that column. You can go there. And she plots every day the number of increase logarithmically, in the sense that, and then with that she gives a graph of what the figure might have been if the lockdown had not come in. And she shows there that India's numbers, infections were doubling every 3 days. Then March 12, there were some restrictions put in on travel, etc. School, colleges were shut. These came to 5 days, doubling every 5 days on March 23. Then between March 23 and 29, they went up again to doubling every 4 days because the Tablighi cluster came in. Once that was absorbed, it started declining. So from 4 back to 5, then 6, then 7. Now she reckons on the chart that this is 8 days. Now, you might say, oh, these are Indian figures, the same Government of India data, so how can you believe it? This must be all wrong. So look at international data. So we look at data from World Health Organization, from European Center for Disease Control, and also from Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins University, as you know, became famous, unfortunately, briefly infamous, because a study emerged, a quote-unquote study emerged, predicting, I think, millions of dead in India, or at least 1 million dead in India, and tens of crores of infections in short time. And that study came with the logo of Johns Hopkins University, to which then the university immediately objected, and the logo was taken off. Nevertheless, it was in the name of that university that these dire predictions were made. So that university itself has a very good system and very good school that maintains the data. So if you look at that data, WHO says India's numbers are doubling every 7 days. European Center for Disease Control also says India's numbers are doubling every 7 days. And Johns Hopkins University says they are doubling every 8 days. Now, so could it be that all of these are complicit with Modi government? And what about the rest of us? So I watch everything on global media, everything that I can access on COVID, because lockdown keeps you at home over long periods. Also, you stay up a lot at night. And I find that every couple of days, either there is a commentary or a story, one expressing incredulity at India's figures, and generally suggesting or insinuating that figures must be enormously higher and those are being hidden. Now, this also presumes that people like us and our reporters, who are also looking at government figures with a high degree of suspicion, are either complicit with the Modi government, or we are so scared that we can't speak the truth. Now, once again, even if all that is true, somebody has to find the truth. Of course, there are convenient methods available. I mean, we saw the other day, I think it was the BBC, which had a story based on 2 anonymous doctors from one unnamed hospital saying that lots of people are dying from respiratory collapse, but they are not being checked out for COVID. Now, even if you check out the total number of dead in the hospitals on those days in the city of Bombay, you don't see an unusual spike. So we check out these things. You cannot just fictionalize these things and make presumptions because this is happening in some distant, poor third world country. This is not the India of 1918. Somehow there seem to be visions of our drains being filled with bodies, our crematoriums running out of wood, our graveyards running out of space. That hasn't happened yet. Hopefully, God willing, will not happen in future also once lockdown is lifted. But you can see that this lockdown, drastic as it is the most stringent in the entire world so far, has slowed down the spread of the disease. So the era when you could get away with this, particularly in third world or poorer countries, should now end. And I say it in the column also because India has had very recent experience of this kind of criminal callousness. Because until 2007, a lot of the same community of global media, global activists, foundation fattened public health community, and many others had declared India to be the HIV/AIDS capital of the world. They had already declared that with 5.7 million infections, India was number 1 in the world and was going bigger and bigger. In fact, 2002, Bill Gates came to India, gave $100 million for AIDS control, and said that by 2010, India will have 25 million AIDS cases, 2.5 crores. Think about it. That is more than, in 2010, would have been almost 3% of all of India. But what happened? There's that in 2007, suddenly a paper came out in Lancet, which questioned this, and Lancet said that this methodology is wrong, and immediately and conveniently and without batting an eyelid, no apologies, India's numbers got revised by UNAIDS. That was the holy UN. From what to what? From 5.7 million, guess, from 5.7 million to 2.5 million, which means this poor country was being subjected to a 140% exaggeration all these years. And immediately, India lost the top spot in the total number of HIV infections and became number 3 behind South Africa and Nigeria. And I can tell you, even since then, India's HIV positivity number has been declining. So a correction is still going on. Some brave Indians dared to question this, because anybody who questioned this was then called complicit, as we might be called now. Because everybody only wanted to believe the worst. And lots of good people had joined this very well-funded wine and cheese army to protect India from HIV/AIDS. Shatrughan Sinha, as health minister in 2002, questioned Bill Gates when he predicted 2.5 crores by 2010. And he said, you are just spreading panic. In 2005, S.Y. Qureshi, who we know better as our former chief election commissioner, he was then the head of National AIDS Control Organization. He questioned this and he said these figures are wrong, but they were dismissed at that point. In 2007, suddenly it went 5.7 million to 2.5 million, and suddenly it looked like AIDS crisis was over. It wasn't over. It had earlier been conjured up as a mythology. Now that mythology was conveniently forgotten. So that's a very recent lesson. Let us not fall into that trap once again, because these things have consequences. Even that campaign had a negative consequence, because it took away a lot of resources and attention from other genuine problems to HIV/AIDS, because that was seen as something destroying India. And the one campaign that suffered because of that was the tuberculosis campaign. And tuberculosis really is India's big curse.